Township. It is time for another edition of the One More and I'm Out of Here podcast. Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Carroll, and we have a big podcast. Not only are we going to have a very special guest today, but we are live on the YouTube right there. And this is the first time we've done it in front of the big audience out here at the varsity. Let's hear you, people. They're here. Rob Herking, what do you think about that?
I think you actually spoke right. It is a huge podcast.
Huge.
It's not a special
Pretty
one,
big.
but it's a huge podcast. We got Jason Kiefer down there on the other end working the board. Hopefully everything's working.
We think it is.
We think it is, and I noticed Dan's still rolling around with his old school
Everything's great.
flask.
Medicinal purposes.
You might
right
have
there.
a drinking problem.
We'll be all right.
I'm going to take the liberty at this point in time to introduce who everybody is here to see. He just had a recent birthday, February 24th.
That's right.
Born 1977, 2 years younger than me. Bronson Arroyo played for multiple Major League Baseball teams. The Pirates, Red Sox, Reds. You went somewhere else, and then you came back for one more year with the Reds.
Diamondbacks.
D-backs.
Diamondbacks. Yeah, the D-backs. And musician, too. We're going to cut into all this with Bronson, and we appreciate his time and giving us his time willingly today, which is awesome. And we're looking forward to meeting this man. I enjoyed watching him play baseball here. We're going to talk about how long it took him to study with the Rockettes in New York for his delivery on the pitching mound. That's one thing that I want to get into at least.
You are sitting right next to him, and you are allowed to punch him.
Most people do. I'm a defense attorney. Everybody wants to
We
hit me.
actually encourage it.
I don't know if my shoulder can take that right now.
But can we get a big round of applause for our guest, Bronson Arroyo?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's what I'm talking about.
Thank you.
Make sure you talk right into that, too.
Aside from the mayor of Cincinnati, I think Bronson's probably one of the most liked Reds of recent. I know I enjoyed watching him.
We talking about Sean Casey or the real mayor?
Nah, Sean Casey, Jesus. Everybody hates the real mayors here, man. That's why we live outside the city. So you were born in Key West?
Yeah, born in Key West. My family was there since the 1800s, and kind of a strange upbringing because I didn't realize how isolated the place was. I didn't own a pair of pants till I was like 12 years old because it never got below 50 degrees.
Jesus, that sucks.
I know.
I mean,
I
that
barely
just sounds
It's a
horrible.
horrible upbringing.
I know.
Good God.
No, it was a great time, but you didn't know what a different place it was. Now when I go down to Key West and I'm flying in, you actually look at it. You're like living on a sandbar. I mean, it's 2 miles by 4 miles. It's almost non-existent.
Damn. I've never been in. My wife and I have talked our 50th birthdays. We're going to go to Key West, and I just want to experience it. I want to see Hemingway's place.
You got to check it out. It's definitely a unique vibe. It's a mixture of a lot of things. It makes you feel a bit like you're in New Orleans, but being in Florida, it's a big mix of Spanish and Cubans and just tons of culture, restaurants. I think there's 280 restaurants in a place that's that small.
On that small island, yeah. I've been many times, and it's one of my favorite places to be.
So when you grow up in a place like that and you're a young kid, do you have a sense that everyone else in the United States lives the same way you do, or do you have a sense that other people, like there's snow and horrible weather and stuff like that?
Didn't understand any of that. I literally was running around the Keys, with no shirt, no shoes, and fishing across the street in the canals, catching barracuda, and I just thought it was normal life. Also, the baseball culture down there was very strange. I mean, I was a 7 and 8 year old kid. You're playing right in the middle of the city, and you're playing under lights, and there's cars whizzing by, and they've got sirens going off when people hit home runs, and it was like an event in a lot of ways. And it was, I can remember standing, listening to the national anthem, getting ready for, those Little League games and being just as nervous as I was pitching in the World Series because of the atmosphere that it brought.
Now, your father's Cuban, correct?
Yeah, my father was born in Cuba. He came to the Keys. His family came there in the early 50s before Castro had taken over, so it was still, a free place that you could leave.
And you matriculated from Key West to play baseball in high school. Where was that? That was up north.
Yeah, so it's north of Tampa by an hour, a small little town called Brooksville. And strange kind of fact that, that back then there was no travel ball. So when we moved up there, my father actually just picked the area. He knew he wanted to be somewhere in that area. We had checked out Lakeland and a few other places, but we ended up in this small town of Brooksville, and you're playing at your little league for Dairy Queen or the bank down the street, right? I mean, this is not travel ball. This is just Saturdays and Tuesdays or whatever. No lights out there, and
Normal little league.
Normal little league, right?
Yeah.
And AJ Brzezinski plays 15 years in the big leagues. He's my catcher when I'm 13 years old.
Oh my God.
Played against him at 10, 11, and 12, and we also have 3 other guys that played AAA ball for a while from that same league. So there was 5 of us that could have played in the big leagues for quite some time from the same little league. It's pretty amazing.
That is
amazing. Crazy. At what point in your life did you realize that you may have potential, that you may have a shot at making it to the big leagues?
You know, it started super early for me. I mean, obviously, you know, you're kind of born with biology in a way. Sometimes your hand-eye coordination can be better than most kids. And my father was not a baseball guy, even though he's from Cuba. He was just a lot more physical. He played high school basketball and football. But he asked me when I was 5 or 6 if I wanted to play a sport. And I think I said I wanted to play t-ball. And he's like, "You sure?" I said, "Yeah." And he just realized that I could backhand a ball and throw it across the infield like a 12-year-old. I was just on a whole nother level than most of the kids. So you start thinking about that, but he was already lifting weights really heavy with his friends in the Keys. In the 70s, they were squatting, benching, and deadlifting a lot of weight. And so he just looked at me and said, "I think I'm going to put this kid in the weight room and see if I can get him a free education in college." And so we set out upon this journey. And, you know, I was carbo loading and I was resting 2 days before I pitched. And, you know, I have videos of me as an 8-year-old kid, and I just recently have looked up records. I was like, let me just see if I can find anybody else pushing this type of weight in the world anywhere. And I was astonished to find an article in Men's Fitness magazine that had a kid that outweighed me by double, and I was warming up with weight that they are saying are like records these days. I was an 8-year-old kid. I weighed 60 pounds on this video. I squat 255s. I deadlift 235, and I bench 130 pounds. A little tiny kid. And so because of that, we were talking about playing in the big leagues from a very young age. Yeah. We were living the life of an athlete.
Not many people probably peg you as a power lifter, though, dude.
No, absolutely not. You know, I was when I was drafted, I was 6'4", 155 pounds. So I was probably 20 pounds less than I am now. I was I was so skinny in the rookie league with the Pirates that they would say to everyone, when we go to the ballpark, you guys get 1 sandwich, 1 apple, 1 bag of chips, except for Arroyo. He can eat whatever he wants. And I was always the thinnest guy on the team, but you know, it didn't have anything to do with strength, because we were slowly, meticulously, day after day after day, just kind of conjuring up these things in the weight room. And you know, I don't think there was nothing special about me. It was just the fact that we were doing the work day to day.
And what was I'm going to ask, what was your max bench? Because I'm noticing you got some long ass arms. You don't have the T-Rex arms that most of the power lifters, the big benchers have, where they just hit the nipple on a 2-inch down and 2-inch up.
Yeah, so the last time so we would max out twice a year because we were playing sports and you couldn't do that year round. So you'd build 6 months and you'd try to break your record. And usually you're breaking your record by 5 or 10 pounds, right, when you're pushing near a max. So the last time I maxed out, I was a 16-year-old kid, and we started figuring out that for pitching, there were some other exercises that were going to be more advantageous to being a pitcher, mostly shoulder exercises with the tubing and the light dumbbells that they call Job exercises. We started down that path because my elbow was bothering me when I was a junior in high school. So when I was a sophomore,
you know what causes that, right? Junior in high school.
Well, that's true.
Isn't it funny?
Or going to prison.
Yeah, or prison.
Both. I mean, if you're in Shawshank, yeah, prison.
Isn't it funny though? Like you were talking, just playing Saturday ball, no travel ball, and especially us up here. Yeah, when we were all in school, you played Little League. Occasionally, you had a kid that was on a select team, but now the advantages that all these kids have now, indoor practices all year, you know, travel tournaments all year, where when we were growing up, it wasn't that way. You played in the summer, and then that was it. You played another sport to stay in shape for baseball if that was your deal.
Right. And
so it's amazing.
I did that as well. You know, we were playing other sports, like you said, but you know, we kind of. What my father did for me is kind of what a lot of kids get to do now. Not so much the weight room part of it, but just thinking about the game of baseball year round and really getting real instruction from people who've played at the big league level or whatever, and not just having, you know, your plumber that is the only guy who wants to coach the little league team, you know, trying to tell you how to throw a baseball. So
McGregor's shoes and socks jacked up to his knees.
Exactly. and you know, and that's why you see the bar being raised. That's why there's so many guys throwing 95 to 100. It's nothing to do with anybody being any different than they were 20, 30 years ago. It's just the fact that kids are now putting in work that most of us did not get to do at a young age. But to answer your question, I was 16. I weighed about 100 and back then I weighed probably 120 pounds. I benched 240. That was the last time
That's amazing.
For long arms, man, that
Yeah.
is pretty damn good.
That was the last time we maxed out when I was 16.
Holy smokes! and speaking of kids throwing fastballs, I remember, and I'm not. Your fastball wasn't the fastest, but the movement you had on your ball, your fastball, everything else, your repertoire of pitching, the break and everything else was phenomenal. You didn't even need a fastball. Your slider, your curve, everything was beautiful.
Yeah, there was.
How did you work on that to accomplish that and master that and the movement that the ball wanted to take? You go both ways on one pitch.
Yeah, I think most of the strategy that came in the game for me was because when you're a kid and when you physically can dominate people with a fastball, you don't tend to look for anything else, right? And when we're 10, 11 years old, you don't generally throw any other pitch besides a fastball. Maybe you're working on a changeup or something. But
there's one kid in the league that and you're like, oh God, I don't want to
face him, right?
Yep.
And I was that kid. I can remember being 9 years old in the Keys, and parents would have to come out of the stands sometimes and push kids in the box because they were terrified to get hit with the ball. Because I was throwing it hard compared to most kids, but. What you're usually teaching there is the fact that, power wins, and a lot of times guys don't develop feel for pitching and they don't develop strategy. But for me, being in the weight room with my father, he was always talking about strategy. So from a very young age, even though I could dominate the game physically, we were talking about changing tempos. The stuff you saw Johnny Cueto do at the end of his career here, where he was, pausing or quick pitching somebody. We were doing a lot of these things. I was dropping down. You wonder how I could throw a breaking ball from all different arm angles. It's because I was doing that since I was a kid, right? He was talking to me a lot about strategy, about how to beat people with less. And you don't generally get that until you're into pro ball. And so it allowed me to think about the game in a different way. So when I did get to the big league level and my fastball really wasn't something that could beat, you can't beat Manny Ramirez or David Ortiz with 88 and a 90.
Right.
But I had the ability to beat him at a chess match mentally and just get it off the meat of the bat and let him hit something soft to someone.
Did your dad also teach you? And I had read in one story years ago that your pronounced leg kick was also kind of like a distraction device to an extent. Is that not true, or is that just something that is natural, or did you create that manufactured?
It wasn't purposeful to try to trick anybody. That was just that was what my 7 and 8 year old mind conjured out of Dwight Gooden's mechanics. Okay. So 1984-85, Dwight Gooden was an absolute stud with the New York Mets, right? And my parents were Mets fans for some reason. And so he had this high leg kick, and that's what my childhood mind kind of morphed out of it, and not knowing how unorthodox it was until you started watching yourself back on film. You don't watch yourself on film back in those days at high school level, right? So
unless you're at a pizza joint after the game or whatnot with your parents.
Right. So I only got to see myself on film in the minor leagues. By the time you're 19 years old, your mechanics are pretty much locked and loaded in your brain, and it's hard to change them. And so that was just something that I morphed out of that, and it just became something that was, easy for me to do. It made it easier for me to be relaxed on the mound, because what I was doing is I was actually, you said about the Rockettes. Well, the Rockettes, if you watch them, they're kicking their whole leg up, and it's like kind of hard. But for me, I was using my foot to flip my leg up, so I didn't have to work so hard to get my leg up. And there was a time in Double-A where they tried to take it away from me for a minute. Really? And what I would find is, like, after the second or third inning, that my hip flexor would be exhausted because I wasn't used to picking my leg up. I was used to using my foot to flip it up. And so you wouldn't teach that to a kid normally, because you wouldn't want them to rock backwards and be off balance. But my hamstrings were loose enough to be able to do it, and it just became something that was comfortable.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you if you had any coaches try to coach that out of you. And so
actually,
that happened in Double-A ball.
Yeah, and it was the guy who had drafted me, which is
really,
which is kind of funny.
So he knew you were bringing that.
Yeah.
And then tried to change your mechanics.
Because over the years, what you don't realize is the guy who drafted me has now been with the Yankees for 15 years, and he says to me sometimes, I'm ashamed of some of the things that I taught back in the Pirate days and in the late 90s to some of these kids, because he goes, now I know they're absolutely wrong. And that was coming from a man who lives and breathes the pitching all day, every day, right? And so, you can imagine at the Little League level the bad advice you might be getting over the years, or how the game has evolved and how we figure out through science that some things are just BS and some things are true. And so back then he was like, let's do an experiment here and see if we can take this away from you and see if it would get better. And he realized very quickly that it wasn't going to work out for me.
What's your opinion on going through Little League, high school, the pitch counts? I don't know where you were at growing up as far as how far into a game they would let you go, but as far as like what they're doing for the kids now of pulling them out, making them rest.
Right.
Versus where we were growing up and it was you're going till you're throwing crap.
Right. Yeah, I like protecting kids' arms for sure. I mean, you don't want to have. I think there should be some sort of a limit. At the big league level, I don't think there should be a limit. I think
Right. And that's kind of where that's where
I've always said. I remember when I was with the Diamondbacks, I got called into the office by Kirk Gibson and the general manager, everybody, and they were like, "Hey, man, we see that your arm is killing you. It's ridiculous. You can't even play catch in between starts. Like, we need to get you out of the rotation." And I'm like, "This is what you have paid me to do. I'm near the end of my career. You paid me $11 million this year. Just let me go." And I had no ligament in my elbow. It had already broken. And I pitched 8 more times, and I had a tear in my shoulder. But at the big league level, for me, it's like, what your eyes tell you is how the game should be dictated. If Max Scherzer's out there and he's got 117 pitches and he looks strong, I'm leaving him out there. And then there's other times where a guy might not look strong after 85 pitches, and that's the way I'm going to go. But for kids, I think there should definitely be a cap. There's got to be a certain amount of rest, and you can't take advantage of, a kid that's bigger and stronger than everybody else, and just because he can dominate the game, you don't want him pitching 10 innings in one weekend and taking a chance of hurting himself for later down the road.
Especially on a weekend when you're doing potentially a doubleheader on Friday, doubleheader on Saturday, doubleheader on Sunday, and then you go home.
Right.
And you've got a limited amount of pitchers. Yeah.
And most kids that are pitching are usually one of the better hitters on the team.
Yes.
So they're playing another position. Maybe you're playing center field or shortstop. You're having to fire your arm up then as well. And, it was part of the reason why I felt like I went for almost 20 years without getting hurt. Part of it was the fact that we threw almost year-round. But that you can't say that for every kid. So, you go out there and play travel ball. Maybe you haven't touched a baseball in 3 weeks or something, and then you're going to go out there and ask a kid to pitch 6 innings and then take 1 day off and come in relief. Some of that can be very harsh on the arm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead, Dan.
So Pittsburgh drafted you. And if my notes are correct, you spent 3 years with Pittsburgh. Then you get traded to Boston. I've heard a lot of players talk about that first time they get traded, that it's a shock to the system, that it hits a lot of guys funny in a weird way. What was it like for you the first time you got traded?
Yeah, so I was in the Pirate organization actually for 8 years. I played parts of those 3 seasons at the major league level, but I had been in the organization for 8 years, and so I got picked up off the waiver wire actually. So that was a bit of a shock in a way. It wasn't a trade. It was a fact that when you're out of options. So at the big league level, there's only 3 times that if you're on the 40-man roster that they can send you to the minor leagues before they have to keep you at the big league level. So at the end of 2002, I was out of options. The Pirates needed to keep me at the big league level in 2003, or they had to offer me up to every other team in the league. Yeah. And they offered me up to every team in the league, and the Red Sox claimed me off the waiver wire. And yeah, it was a bit harsh. In the minor leagues, you kind of grow up with these guys. You're 18, 19, 20. You're traveling on buses around the country. You don't have any money. You're living together. You're sleeping on floors. A lot of times you're traveling on, 13 hours to pitch the next day in Hagerstown, Maryland from Augusta, Georgia. I mean, it's like, what you see in the movies a lot of times. It's a band of brothers in a way. And when you go to a new organization, especially if you've already gotten to the big league level, you can then find yourself being the new kid at school. And so, it was tough getting to the Red Sox, but it was also an opportunity to see that another organization might be operating differently. I had been with the Pirates for 8 years, and what they thought about conditioning and what they thought about how you should approach the game, you thought maybe was across the board. And when I got to the Red Sox, I realized there was a whole different mindset here and a whole different way to slice the apple. And it was really beautiful to come into a camp that I felt like was a lot more enlightened than what I was receiving over in the Pirate days.
What I'm gonna shift a little. What batter made you most anxious that you had to face throughout your career?
Albert Pujols for a lot of years was as good as they has ever been in the game. I think for probably a decade he was the toughest guy to get out in the game. And Barry Bonds, I didn't face him nearly as much, but near the end of his career, I probably faced him 15 times, and that was always unsettling. I mean, there's only so many guys in the game that have an unbelievable eye, that never swing at pitches off the plate, can hit 300 every year, and can hit the ball out of the park in any direction. And so those guys were just terrifying to face. I mean, you'd have Albert at the plate every time you pitch in St. Louis. It would be like you got a 3-1 lead. Somehow, some way, they get Albert to the plate in the 7th inning, and you're like, here we go again, right? It's like you just pray and he hits a missile at the shortstop because
I just be hoping he didn't hit one back at me.
Trust me. There's plenty of times especially near the end of my career, that I thought, let me just get out of here without getting hit by a line drive. Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to go home. That's all I want to do is go home.
What about You were with Arizona, Randy Johnson. You ever meet him?
Yeah, after he retired.
Okay. Was he okay after he killed that bird?
I don't know.
I didn't know if there was
I'm sure-
counseling and shit that was involved.
Probably for Randy, I don't think so. I think Randy probably had that same DNA as Gibson from '68. I
Oh
don't think
my
he
God.
minded drilling
Yeah,
guys.
that was by far one of the more entertaining videos I've ever seen.
I was in spring training just a couple of years after that. I was just with the Red Sox. I think it was '03. I'm playing golf with Louis Tiant and Jim Rice.
How about that?
At a place called Renaissance down in Fort Myers, and it was like the second tee, and I hit a good tee ball, and it hit a crane, one of those big white birds flying across right in the chest, and it exploded just like that. And
Oh,
it was
shit.
it was terrible. It ruined the rest of my day. I just couldn't stop thinking about killing this bird.
Well, they're plethora. I mean, there's a ton of them. You're fine. You're fine.
It's when you call the clubhouse and say, "Cart girl, I need a cart girl on number 2."
We need alcohol.
We're going to talk to Bronson about his time with the Reds coming up, but before we do, want to mention some of our sponsors, and one, of course, is Kerry Wolfangle. And when it comes to real estate across Cincinnati or anywhere around the world, the two names to trust are Comey and Shepherd Realtors and Kerry Wolfangle. Everyone wants a realtor who knows the market, but for Kerry, it is really a lot more than that. Her business is built on a relationship of honesty and trust with her clients. Kerry Wolfangle has been recognized with many of the highest awards in the business, and it is why she is the only real estate agent that we recommend. So if someone you know is interested in buying a house, selling a house, moving in, moving out, call Kerry, 513-265-3125, or kwolfangle at comey.com. Your road home starts at Wolfangle.
Good job, Dan.
Thank you.
Great job, Dan. I mean, he's getting better, isn't he? Come on,
It's not
everybody.
easy.
Round of applause for Rosetta Stone.
Rosetta Stone.
Rosetta Stone, man. Graduate
It's just grammar lessons. It's
2021.
He knows English. He just doesn't know grammar.
Well, we're back. Real quick, I'm going to put Bronson on the spot, and I told him this. I gave him a heads up because Marty and Amanda did it.
Oh, yeah.
Reds wins this year. You got 162 games. I've told you what Marty picked and Amanda picked. Amanda was a little bit more optimistic than the pessimistic Marty.
And for
Right.
people that don't know, that don't hang out here, we do this every year before opening day, our group of guys, and then it's grown. But you pick the wins, and then if you nail it, everybody owes you a drink. If you're the last person, and we've got like a whole page of rules, but just try to get as close as you can.
I know that's tough for me because honestly, what you hear over the years when you're inside of a locker room is there's guys who just hated Marty because he was negative a lot of times, or you just you kind of critique the game in a way when you're not playing it, and you hear the same thing with retired guys. So they get on TV, and then let's say somebody like Sam LeCure is acting like it's very easy to pitch. You know what I mean? And you're like, well, why wasn't your ERA 2.5, right? So
I was waiting for that.
hey, it's tough. So when you ask me a question like that, I always feel indebted to the guys inside the locker room because I know how hard it is, and I never have lost sight of the fact that it's very difficult to play in the major league level. But if you're also trying to be honest, right? You're also not trying to just sugarcoat it and BS people and say, oh, the Reds are going to win the World Series this year. I think the problem in the organization right now for me personally is that there's not a lot of money to go out. They've never had a ton of money to go out and you can't just go sign a guy like Max Scherzer. So you're always dependent upon the farm system. And inside of our farm system, you've got a ton of guys right now that are still green at the big league level. I mean, when you have 6 and 7 guys in your lineup who don't have 2 years at the major league level, that's very difficult to be successful. It took me parts of probably 3 seasons at the major league level to finally feel like I was the same guy there as I was in the minor leagues. I'm 40 games over 500 in the minor leagues, and you're having these seasons where you're constantly a winner, but then you get to the big league level, and the best guy in a AAA lineup in the 3-hole is now hitting in the 7-hole in a big league lineup, right? So it's a whole nother place to try to be successful over the long haul. And you've got so many young guys in this rotation, between Green, Lodolo, and Ashcraft. I think, honestly, a lot of this season depends on them. If those guys can stay healthy and if they can give the team 12 wins, then you might have a chance to have a good season. But if I have to put a number to it, Marty went 68 and
68. Amanda was optimistic
Right.
at 80, but don't worry. We got Chris Short over here with 93.
93.
Wow.
Wow.
Are
93.
you smoking dope?
We
Well, I
call
can-
him a dumbass.
I still have this story stuck in my mind. New Year's Eve, I'm at the Hard Rock with Pete Rose, and we're taking pictures with people. And they opened up the sports book, and they said, Pete, you're going to make the first bet for the Reds to win the World Series, $100 tonight. And he looked over at me, and he said, they're going to think I'm the dumbest son of a bitch that ever lived.
I wanted to call Pete and say, hey, I'll teach you how to bet, and I'm not even that good, but that's not the one that you're going to make, my man.
I know. But, I was just in the locker room the other day talking to the guys and playing some music. They had like a little talent competition a couple days ago in Arizona. And I was out there, and you just love seeing these young guys, and you hope they do well. But if I have to put a number on it, they lost 100 games last year. I'm probably going to give them 10% better this year. So if they lose 90, what do they win, 72?
Yep.
72.
I'm going to go 72 and 90.
That's a good.
I think that's fair.
That.
I think that's fair.
Book
You
it, Dano. 72.
Yeah, 72 and 90.
And if we're looking at inflation, you might need to go a little bit more than 10%, but that's a whole nother topic.
And I do like the fact that Rex back there looked at Rick. We already explained the Rick rule to Bronson. Don't worry, Rick. Cheap bastard.
So you just got back from Goodyear, Arizona, didn't you?
I was out there playing a festival. There was a big festival there where
Yeah.
Green Day and Eddie Vedder were headlining it, and I was performing this original record that I just put out for the first time. And so David Bell asked me to come in. So I came in that morning, and I had brought a guitar, and it just happened to be talent day. They were making all the rookies get up and show some talent. And so Joey Votto started it off by singing a Toby Keith song, and he was dressed, head to toe like a redneck. And and then I came out, and I just talked to the guys a little bit because I knew I wasn't going to get a lot of time with them in camp this year, and played them a couple songs, had a good chat, and then I watched the rookies get up, and either there was a magician in the crew, there was a comedian in the crew, and then there was a couple of guys singing, so it was cool.
Well, there's a picture from the clubhouse of you there with the guitar, and you see Joey Votto with the cutoff shirt on, the jeans, the
Right.
big belt buckle, and all that stuff.
That's right.
And my question is Joey Votto, can he sing?
No.
I mean,
No.
No.
he's got some chops in the broadcast booth. Some of his social media stuff is pretty funny, but he can't sing.
No, he's got a dry sense of humor. He stole a little bit of that from Scott Rowland, and Scott Rowland stole a little bit of that from Kevin Millar. So that's been passed down the line a bit. But Joey's a smart guy. He can be very funny, but he definitely doesn't sing.
Now you know. We can only get that story from Bronson Arroyo.
Dan doesn't sing either. If you guys have seen that
That's a
Facebook
fact.
video up at the was that Lori's Roadhouse? That was shit.
No, that was at Chris Short's bachelor party.
Oh, that's right. That was bad.
That video that actually needs to go on the Instagram.
So
It will live in infamy.
That's all
forever.
right. Dan Varner likes me. That's all I care about.
no, he doesn't. He entertains you. So Bronson, you've shifted since baseball, and we'll probably venture back to baseball, but you shifted to music. And speaking of Green Day, love Green Day. I saw them for the first time a couple years ago. It was an awesome concert, and I'm watching these guys in their 50s. I'm like, holy shit, I'm in my 40s. I don't want to jump that high. What is your favorite genre of music that you enjoy playing?
I love. A lot of times we love what we loved as a kid, and when I was, freshman in high school, it's when all that stuff out of Seattle hit. Nirvana,
grunge.
Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, all the grunge stuff. Yeah, Stone Temple Pilots. I'd been listening to the radio in the weight room with my father all those years from the time I'm 6 on. You're listening to the Beatles, you listen to the Mamas and the Papas. You're listening to Elton John and a lot of the oldies, and I enjoyed the music, but there was something about hearing that grunge stuff that just felt more real. It felt like, they were coming from a different place, like more true stories. They weren't trying to write a hit in a way. It felt like you were telling me a story about some hardship in life. And so I gravitated towards that, even though my life was not dark at all. But I enjoyed the darkness of the music. And, and then Live came out, and Matchbox 20 and Stained, and all these great bands that came out in the 2000s and in the late 90s. That's the stuff that I started playing when I picked up an acoustic guitar about 25 years ago, and to this day, it's still probably my favorite stuff to play.
You learn any other instruments other than the guitar, or?
No, not really. It's hard enough. I still, it's been 25 years, and I don't feel comfortable with a guitar in my hand half the time now. Most of the time, I'm playing with a band, with the guys that are behind me are much better musicians than I am, and it's very difficult to give a performance and be vocally dialed in as well. There's a lot more going on than just standing in front of the microphone. If you have a ton of hits, maybe you can do it like George Strait and just stand there and never move all night.
Right.
But I also loved watching the early '90s Eddie Vedder. I mean, he's climbing.
He was all over the place.
Yeah, he's climbing the rafters in the arena. He's giving people what they came there for. And so for me, a lot of times I'm trying to give a bit of a performance as well. So having a guitar in your hand just gives an extra layer of difficulty, which I can still do, but it's just not as comfortable.
I understand.
So you picked it. You said 25 years ago. So you picked it up kind of late.
Yeah, I was 22 years old. I was in Double-A with the Pirates, and I was just sitting with an acoustic guitar in the locker room one day, and I was kind of picking that same thing that everybody does, that nothing else matters, the open 4 strings of the Metallica song, and somebody walked through the clubhouse, the assistant general manager, and said, "Hey, I've got this old Yamaha acoustic guitar if you want it." I said, "Sure, I'd love to have it." And once I started hearing songs that were coming out on the radio that I loved, I was hearing that come out of my own fingers. It was almost like a magic trick in a lot of ways, and it was something that I couldn't put down. It was just this attraction to a guitar, so it would just sit in your room. And every day I would take it with me on the road, and then it just became something also that once you started being able to put songs together and sing them, it was like an outlet to get some angst off your chest in a way. The way you go to a workout in the morning, sometimes you don't want to do it, but when you get done, you get those endorphins and you're buzzing and you feel good.
Yeah.
Singing is the same thing for me, not so much the playing the guitar, but the vocal part of it is a workout, and it's hard, and it became something I felt like I couldn't live without.
I'm sure this is a dumb question, but I ask a lot of them. But like when you got done at the ball field, like was that your outlet? Like you took that guitar wherever you took it, and that just, you didn't have to think about baseball. You had something else to kind of decompress.
Yeah, absolutely. I even back in the early days with the Pirates, I can remember sitting on top of a rooftop and just hacking away through songs and, just thinking, somebody's going to listen to this one day. I don't know where, if it's going to be 7 people in a bar or if it's going to be, 10,000 people. I have no idea. But I feel like, I'm gonna be doing this at some point in my life, and it definitely was an outlet. There was times, guys will tell you now, even guys like Marty Brenneman, or I've had security called on me many a times at not only in hotel rooms, but going across the street from hotel rooms. You don't realize, like in some of these cities, it's all concrete. So you'd be in Milwaukee or in Chicago, and I'm sitting across the street just playing like in a set of concrete steps that have a little bit of reverb, but I'm singing and it's bouncing off the side of the hotel. And so next thing you know, security's getting called, and they're coming down there like, "Hey man, everybody can hear you on the whole side of the hotel."
There's some vagrant playing a guitar across the street. Get him out of here.
Tell them to open the damn windows and enjoy.
That's true.
So you write your own shit sometimes too.
I have now. I didn't for a long, long time.
What do you do first? And I asked John this. What was that 2 weeks ago? What do you do first? Do you do the lyrics, or does the melody come first?
Yeah, the melody first. Yeah,
melody.
It's like you're hacking around on the guitar. I would think most guys, when you think about like the Red Hot Chili Peppers' "Under the Bridge," that song came where the music was created around a poem. That seems very, very difficult for me to do. It's like, you hack away at some chords, you get a melody, you're humming, and you enjoy, and it starts feeling like something. And depending on what the chord structure is, the song could feel like it's a sad ballad, or does it feel like it's up tempo and has energy in it? And so then you start thinking about, what is this going to be about? And you're trying to pick a subject to write about. But to do it the other way around, where you're just writing words, maybe like Simon and Garfunkel, and then say we're going to create the music around it, almost seems impossible for me.
And that's kind of you have people that think, their minds think differently. So some guy may do it the complete inverse of you, and then thinking your idea is like, I can't do it that way.
Yeah.
And just the artistic, we've got friends in the room that are musicians that write their own music, and to be able to put your thoughts, to music and then play it for people, but to where it sounds good, it gets the point across. Like that artistic ability, I personally don't have it. I'm jealous of it, but that process, like Rob was saying, like the process to me is very intriguing because it just shows how different minds work.
Yeah, it was hard for me at first. When this record I just put out on February 17th I wrote all the songs in 2018 and 19 when I retired, and I'd never really taken a stab at writing a song that I thought I'd want to hear on the radio. Everything I'd ever written was for an elementary school, because you were going to talk to some kids and you were going to try to capture their imagination a little bit. And so you're talking very direct, and I'm saying lyrics like, eat your fruits and vegetables because you need to get your sleep at night.
JTM.
Right. So you're just saying straight to the point things, and that's
right.
Easy to write. But if you want to write a song like Black, like Pearl Jam, where so many people could dig into the lyrics and say, what is this about, and how does it, attach to my life,
right.
And everyone could have a different story about that, it was much harder to do. So what I did is I would take subject matter, I would try to write outside of myself, and I would take it to another writer. So a lot of times here, a guy named Elliot Sloan from Blessed Union of Souls lives here, and Elliot's a great writer. And so I would go to his house, he'd say, what do you want to write the song about? I'd give him the chord changes or the riff. This is what it's going to be about. This is what I'm thinking. And then if I got through 3 lines of a verse that I loved and I couldn't figure out the 4th one, he can just keep injecting ideas, and we can finally break through that wall. Right. Once I figured that formula out, and it would take me 4 hours to walk out of his house with a demo. Once I figured that out, I basically banged out 24 songs in about a little over a year. And then I had that was the meat and potatoes of these demos that wind up turning into this record.
I heard you on the radio with Ken Brew a couple of weeks ago, and you were talking about the album, and Some Might Say is the name of the album, and you were talking about some guys you met when you were in Boston that you're still in touch with that are very talented musicians that are on this album. How hard was it to stay in touch with those guys after you had left and you're here in Cincinnati for 14, 15 years, whatever it was?
In this scenario, it was very easy. These guys were I was the music guy in the Red Sox locker room. There's not many guys who play the guitar and sing. So if musicians came around, usually the management would be like, "Hey, Bronson, such and such is here today." So they brought these guys to me, and two of them, Jamie Aronson, who plays guitar for Miley Cyrus, and a kid named Eric Gardner is drumming on this record. He's been playing for Melissa Etheridge for the last few years. But they were in town with Jamie's college band, which is American Hi-Fi. American Hi-Fi and Fuel were in town. So they're in Fort Myers. They're playing. We just became fast friends, and we would hang out in off seasons. I would throw batting practice to these guys. They would come to baseball games if they were on tour with whoever. Whether they were Matchbox 20 sometimes. They were out with Morrissey. It's like musical chairs in the music industry. So they're all touring with somebody different. We run across each other in the summertime, and we would hang. And so we always said we were going to write a record together, and it was kind of in the back of the mind, and didn't know if we'd actually make it come to fruition. But once I got the bug for writing and I started figuring out how to finish these songs, I took them to those guys and said, "Hey, you guys gave me some riffs. Here's what I wrote over them. What do you think?" And then they were like, "Oh, you've been doing some work here. Let's see if we can make a record." And so that's how the ball got rolling.
Yeah, I Googled you before we did the interview.
Wow, good job, Dan. Extensive research. I love it. Was it Wikipedia? How many footnotes?
Who doesn't do that?
Jesus.
But
Dan didn't even know who you were before
at
he
least
walked in
on
the door.
Shit.
But at least on the Google that I was using,
Oh, the Google, huh?
the first thing when I put your name in there, the first thing that comes up
There's
is
a different one?
Bronson Arroyo, American musician.
Yeah.
You got to feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I didn't know if I would even put this record out. I really was just trying to see what it would sound like to write a record with these guys and have a good time. I mean, part of the whole thing for me is you're not even thinking about where the music's going to go. It's about hanging with these guys for 2, 3, 4 weeks in a studio in LA and just creating and having a good time and having great meals together and talking about what do you want it to sound like. And so once we got finished with it, it started. We probably had 70% of it done before COVID hit. And then there was this long pause for a year and a half where I couldn't get out to Los Angeles. And so by the time we went back to listen to it and we realized what we had created was like sounding a lot better to our ears now that we weren't just tired of hearing it, and you start polishing the record up with backup vocals and cellos and pianos and stuff, it felt like something that I wasn't just going to let die. And so it's really the only reason that I'm trying to put it out there in the world, because we felt like it was something of quality. And now starting to play some live shows with these guys, it's just been absolutely amazing to tell your own stories through song, because I've never done that before. I've been singing Eddie Vedder stories my whole life,
right.
and now to put songs out that are your own, and know where I'm the only person who knows where the inception of that story starts and ends. It's been pretty cool.
Your covers of Eddie Vedder are unbelievable. I've seen you live one time, but obviously watched a bunch of your stuff. Your Eddie Vedder's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's weird because that was my favorite record since I'm a 15-year-old kid. And a lot of people don't realize this, but when you sing, you can't conjure up whatever kind of sound you want, right? I just can't go out there and have the range of a Chris Stapleton. I can't have the tone of Chris Stapleton. My baritone tone is very similar to Eddie's voice just by nature. It's just the way it is, I can only go so far with what I have. It's almost like velocity with your arm or your jumping ability. You can improve upon it, but you cannot just become someone who you aren't.
Right.
And that's just where my voice kind of lands in that Stone Temple Pilots / Pearl Jam, Nirvana kind of genre. Is a little gravelly and baritone. And so, Pearl Jam is a genre that is not fun to sing. It is an absolute beast of a workout to get up there and sing those songs off that record, but it's kind of where my voice lies, and it's been fun.
It's your wheelhouse, that's for sure.
I'll tell you, one of my favorite albums, Pearl Jam 10. I killed that thing.
Yeah,
multiple CDs when I was 17, 18, 19 years of age.
Pull the CD out, wipe it off. Oh, it'll play again.
Oh, no, it was horrible. I mean, it's where you're breathing on it. You're doing the fog shit, trying to make it play again.
Where can we find your new album? That way, anybody that's listening, watching, that way. We want to pump that big
anywhere
time.
that you stream your music, Apple Music, Spotify, Deezer, YouTube, wherever you find your music, iTunes if you want to buy it. I actually brought some cards here today that I had a buddy make. I got a buddy who owns a baseball card company, and so sometimes he'll make me cool stuff. I know, but he made me these baseball cards that say Reds Hall of Fame pitcher, and on the back it's got the QR code for the record. So I'll just pass these out before I leave if anybody wants to hear the record. But
I had baseball cards.
We're not ending yet if you're okay with it.
Oh, I'm totally fine with.
But we have some friends of ours
Yes.
that know how to make some things too, and they made you some. Engraved in USA has been taking care of One More and I'm Out of Here podcast since what?
The inception. I mean,
Inception,
the
baby.
inception of the live ones.
These guys are awesome, Bronson, and you need to remember this. Engraved in USA, they're up in Fairfield. They make phenomenal products such as that. I mean, they just make great shit. And they got stuff. Sorry, I don't know how else to describe it. It's good shit. All right? I mean, it's like, what? Shut up. It's like a Cheech and Chong video, Chris. Oh, yeah, that's good.
But and they have all kinds of things.
They do.
That they make.
Check it out online. But they brought a gift for you, and they appreciate you being here with us.
I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here all your years here in Cincinnati as well. Tim and I built this for you, so thank you, and welcome home.
Let me open it up here. and see
Open
what
it
I
up.
got.
Sure,
Fire
open
it up. We don't know what it is.
And very soon you'll be able to find all kinds of merch, all kinds of One More and I'm Out of Here merch. And thanks to our friends at Engraved USA.
Very nice, very nice. It looks like I might have to have a beer, even though I said I'm not a drinker.
Oh, that's all
See
right.
what's on the other
Oh,
side.
this is awesome.
They got
that
near
is
beer.
cool. That's very cool. This is a picture. I don't even actually know who made this. This is from like 06. Yeah,
The Google.
Yeah,
The Google.
yeah.
So Tim was
It's
doing
amazing what
research
happens
with
on
Dan
the
today, huh? That's good.
Yeah, that's amazing. The first time I saw this picture was from a show down in Covington, and from 2006. We had played a small set over there, and somebody made some posters of that. But it's kind of lived for a long time. I've got that on a guitar that Fender had made me, and but thanks, I appreciate that.
So now it's gonna continue to live, whether you regret coming here or not. You're gonna have that for you, with you forever.
Bronson's like, this is the last time I'm in Anderson. I want to, real quick, we're going to come back. Ohio Valley Productions got a party going on. Then you need to check out Ohio Valley Productions. OVP is your one-stop shop for corporate functions, fundraisers, festivals, even a backyard barbecue. We're talking about top talent, live acts, DJs, karaoke, trivia, and more that'll have your party rocking. Quality entertainment and a team with the most experience in the business combined to make your event the one to remember. Got a vision for a great time? Make it happen with Ohio Valley Productions. Just drop an email to dan@ohiovalleyproductions.com. That's dan@ohiovalleyproductions.com, and rock on. And Dano is in the house, and we want to thank him especially for helping set up, as always. We appreciate your equipment. I guess I won't call it a rental unless you're writing it off. Then I'll call it a rental. That way.
I haven't gotten a bill yet, so
Yeah, I haven't seen
we're hoping that we don't get the bill.
Thank you, Dano. Appreciate Dan Marner.
As always,
Love you, Danny.
Met me here very early to get all this stuff
couldn't
set
do it
up,
without
and
Dan Varner.
it was awesome.
So we appreciate Dan. And I know Keith asked in regards to where your album was. What is the name of the album?
It's called Some Might Say. It's one of the songs on there, and we actually couldn't think of a name of the band at all. The name of the band, the only thing that's like a little muddy is I play in a band around town here, and I've been playing in this band since '06, and we basically play anything from the Beatles to Nirvana. We're playing Saturday night on the West Side. If anybody wants to see
There
us
was
up
another
in the
question.
Pirates Den, we're playing this Saturday. A lot of times I don't know what the schedule is.
You're almost like the house band there.
Yeah, we played there. This is gonna be the second time we played there now, but that band is a completely different band. We don't play any original songs. Sometimes we'll play Some Might Say off here, but usually not, because there's a lot of 3-part harmonies on the record. The guys who wrote it, it's very intricate. It's not easy to pull off live, and I've never sat with the guys here and really tried to learn it. But the name of the band is Bronson Arroyo in the '04, because I met these guys all in 2004. We won a World Series that year, but also, it's 4 guys behind me playing music, and the name of the record is Some Might Say, and it's partially because I know that when people come out to a show, sometimes they're going to be like, this guy's a baseball player. What are you doing trying to play music, right? You don't know if you're going to get,
Say Google me, man. It says American musician.
That's true.
Doesn't say anything about
That's
baseball.
true. No, I know. But, it's like,
If it's on Facebook, it's true. Don't worry about it. That's the way everybody works nowadays.
if it's on Facebook, it's all true. That's
Anything
right.
on Insta
It's all
Media,
true. It's always
it's all true. If it's on Facebook, Google. So I love the fact that you're playing on the west side. When you play east side, you ever play east side?
I actually don't know the difference between the east side and the west side here. Most of the
75,
time. I
71.
really don't. I'm like, listen, I didn't leave the house very often when I was playing here. I had somebody, grocery shopping for me because I wanted to pay attention to baseball. So a lot of times I'd go from the ballpark to Mount Adams to the ballpark to Mount Adams. I'd rarely leave.
Nothing wrong with Mount Adams.
No, I loved it.
I
up there.
enjoy
I
Mount
lived there for 8 years. It was fantastic. I mean, it was a little more lively back in the day before,
No shit.
down by the ballpark and kind of, other OTR took over.
We need to get Bronson playing up here, east side.
We may or may not know somebody that
This is the
he
east
should
side,
probably
by the way.
connect with and get him over on the east side.
Hell
I'm
yeah.
sure we are.
It may rhyme with Dan Varner. I'm not sure. I think it rhymes with Dan Varner.
If you look, there is a Facebook page that my guitar player keeps up with on the Bronson Arroyo Band Facebook page.
Yeah.
We usually have all the stuff. I think we're playing in Mason coming up in sometime in the summertime. We usually, we don't advertise. We don't try to ask to play anywhere. It's just like, a lot of charity stuff comes down the pipe.
Right.
And, you're playing little festivals around town.
When you guys just did the Autism Rocks,
Yes.
2 weekends ago?
We played Autism Rocks, right.
That was
And
awesome.
Which
We've
heard
done
it was
that
a
a
great
lot.
turnout. We were on our way back from Detroit.
Yeah.
We were going to try to stop by, but we weren't.
Oh, that's funny. We had come from Flint, Michigan the night before.
Well, shit, we could have rode together.
Yeah. So I think we're playing the Ludlow Garage too coming up sometime. But I don't know. As a musician, you find yourself in different scenarios. So like what we're playing on the west side, we'll play, like I said, from the Beatles to Nirvana. Then over at Ludlow Garage, we're playing the set we've been doing that we did in Flint, Michigan, which is a band around here that's doing all Chili Peppers for an hour and 15 minutes, and then we'll just do all Pearl Jam for an hour and 15 minutes, and it's like a tribute thing, And then I'm playing on this original stuff as well with a totally different band. So, it's hard as a musician because you kind of can't get it out of your blood. You wind up doing more than one thing.
I love the versatility and the fact that you went out, released your own album, put your stuff out there, but are still, covering all these
Yeah.
great songs. And that genre, just like you, growing up with it, I love it. That's all on my playlist.
Sure.
My Harley playlist, I've got a ton of Pearl Jam, Green Day, all
Right.
that stuff. So
Well, in a perfect world, I'd love to go out and play this original record a lot more. But, at the end of the day, it comes down to dollars and cents. And a lot of times it just, I'm a new act. And so, the guys that are playing in my band, they're used to making $5,000 a week on tour, right? I mean, that's what they've been doing for 20 years. So it's like, I can't pull a guy out of Miley Cyrus's band and be like, hey, man, come down here and play and lose money. So in a lot of ways, I'm just trying to find, strategically festivals or something that, shows that make sense for that band. But
Right.
around here, I can play pretty cheap with the guys playing the cover stuff. And it makes
I've
it
seen
fun.
some of the contracts you've signed. Come on now.
Yeah. Oh, baseball-wise, yeah, that's one thing. But musicians are always starving, as you know. And I'm
Absolutely.
not the only guy on the stage.
And
so.
as Jason said, I think we might know somebody, Bronson, that could help you out. I'd love to hear you locally. I'd love to hear you around Cincinnati. I enjoy the fact that you are still local, and you were one of my favorites pitching, and I'm not coming on to you. Don't worry, I'm married with 3 kids, by the way. But no, I did enjoy it. I enjoyed your unusual delivery of the baseball from the mound and everything else, the antics and shit, and the guitar and all the other stuff. It was entertaining to watch you play
Definitely
baseball.
fun to watch.
And it is so awesome to see you here live. What radio station, when you're in Cincinnati, do you listen to on the radio?
And I really haven't listened to a lot
Oh,
of
don't
radio.
go serious on me, man.
I don't. No, I don't. I haven't listened to. Well, I don't know. I'm in a Tesla now. Usually, I just talk to the car and say, "Play this song," and I don't know where it's coming from.
Okay,
To be honest, but
fair enough.
over the years, everybody that's at the ballpark, Seg Dennison is an absolute just gem to be around, and all the radio stations that would come down to the ballpark every year and would just have someone there talking. Those are the ones that you would know in the back of your mind. But I never really listened to a lot of radio, and part of the reason was the fact that if you pitch bad, you pitch bad, right? I don't need to listen to somebody.
Well, I
tell
wasn't
me how
talking
terrible it
talk
was.
radio. I was talking music,
Music,
like
musically.
classical, like 92.5, 102.7.
If I'm having to listen to regular radio, it's going to be classic rock for sure. I know
Okay.
people love the country these days, and kids love the hip hop and the pop. But if you're born before 1980, a lot of times I'd rather hear Bob Seger than Lil Wayne. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
God, yeah.
that's just how it is.
Silver bullet, baby.
I think this crowd likes that. They like that statement.
I think everybody in here was born before 1980, Dan.
So we
I didn't have to get on the internet and Google to find that out, but
well, I want to get back to a little bit of baseball now. You spent a lot of time here with the Cincinnati Reds, and we talked about Marty Brennaman before. Did you ever have a run-in with Marty Brennaman? Give us a Marty Brennaman story.
I never had a run-in with him because when I first got here, I got off to such a good start, right? And I remember we were in Pittsburgh, and I got my butt kicked. And I had come from Pittsburgh, and it was an all right-handed lineup. They had Freddie Sanchez hitting in the 3-hole and Jack Wilson hitting in the 4-hole. And those two guys were great players, but they're not 3- and 4-hole hitters in a big league lineup, right? Those guys are like leading off the top, slapping the ball, can steal a base or whatever, good defenders in the infield. And I got my butt kicked that day, and it was an all right-handed lineup, which is tailor-made for me, throwing a lot of breaking balls. And so I saw I guess that night I said something like, I can't believe I got beat by these guys. It's not the Yankee lineup. I'd been pitching in the American League for a long time, and when you got Jorge Posada hitting 25 homers in the 7-hole, I mean, that's a lineup to deal with. So I just felt like I shouldn't have lost, and I think at the time I was like 7-1 or something. But whatever I said in the paper, Marty had respect for. So he saw me in the lobby checking out. It was getaway day, and he just said, I just want to tell you, man, nobody ever basically, owns their shit in life. And he's like, you did. And, after that, he always had respect for me. And I'm sure there were times that he badmouthed me on the radio. I can remember one time hearing, like, I walked in the locker room and he said something like, I think it was 2011 in the beginning of the season. I was real sick in spring training, and I got off to a bad start. And I think he said something like, the question still begs. He said, what is wrong with Bronson Arroyo? And, I just knew that was par for the course, but I never really took it personal. But I saw him go at guys like Griffey Jr. I mean, I saw Marty and Griffey Jr. go at it in 2006, screaming at each other in the locker room. And at the end of the conversation, Marty basically said, Griff, you can say whatever the fuck you want. He's like, I'm going to be here long after you're gone, man.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Didn't
Yeah.
Marty talk about that?
He did say that, and that is probably one of the greatest lines.
Yeah, and Marty's always had a temper, and he doesn't bite his tongue for anybody.
No,
we
found that out,
and
too.
I respect that in a lot of ways, but I also knew that if I pitched well, they would talk good about me, and it wasn't something I paid attention to. It was part of the reason why I was who I was on the mound without having great stuff is the ability to go into the arena and have 40,000 people looking at you and be able to suppress adrenaline, be able to go methodically through a lineup without, burning too much fuel early on, right? All these little subtleties, but also part of it was the fact that I didn't live with as many insecurities as other people. There's a lot of people at the top of the food chain in acting and music, and, you hear stories about Barbra Streisand being terrified to go on stage, and throwing up before because she thought she sounded terrible, right? One of the greatest singers of all time. I just didn't personally live with that. And part of that was being in the weight room as a kid with my father. He was constantly affirming to me, verbally and with what we were doing, that we're just going to do the work. And whatever comes of it, it doesn't matter, because then we're going to come back to the drawing board and just do more work. And so by the time I got to the big league level, a lot of guys would just second guess themselves so much that I just didn't have a fear of that. And so if I got my butt kicked 2 and 3 times in a row, sure, I didn't enjoy it, but I also wasn't worried about what Tom Brennaman was saying about me on TV.
And don't sell yourself short. Your 1-7 breaking ball. Holy shit. That thing would sink. Was it the breaker or slider?
Yeah,
it was from right in. Yeah,
Curveball,
it was effing unbelievable. From 1 o'clock to 7 o'clock, dropping like a son of a bitch.
Yeah, without that, I wouldn't have survived in the game.
Oh my
sure.
God! So don't sell yourself short, man.
No, I know, but I'm just saying
Your ERA is awesome.
I didn't have overpowering stuff, in a traditional sense. If I threw the ball 95 miles an hour, I felt like I could dominate the game.
But truly,
physically.
with an 85 to 90 mile an hour fastball, and you're breaking shit, do you not think that elongated your career to an extent where a lot of guys are throwing hard,
Yeah.
Tommy Johns, hard, and they're out.
Yeah,
They don't learn the break.
part of the. I think part of it is surviving for such a long time without getting hurt was the ability, like you said, I wasn't throwing as hard as some guys, but also, I wasn't having to go max effort, right? Because if you throw 100 miles an hour like Aroldis Chapman, and he throws every pitch at 100, or let's just say if he throws every pitch at 90 and he can throw 100, he's only pitching at 90%. If I can only throw 85, let's say, and I throw every pitch at 85, even though it's slower than his 90, I'm going at max effort. You can only survive max effort for so long. So part of the reason I could survive for that amount of time without getting hurt was the fact that I could get outs with less.
Yep.
You said it earlier. You said it earlier, the chess match.
Right.
You're playing a chess match against a guy 60 feet 6 inches away from you.
Right.
And that's what I enjoyed about watching you play here in Cincinnati, and obviously where we became to love you. But you being a Red Sox, watching just I mean, it's battle. It is literal, like two generals going against each other.
Right.
Where are we going to put this?
But a lot of times, it's hard to get out of our minds. We always think faster and bigger and badder is better, right? It's really hard, even at the big league level, to tell a guy it doesn't matter how many strikeouts you have, and it doesn't matter how hard you throw as long as they don't hit the ball in the sweet spot. Yeah. And for me, I had always thought along those lines, right? So for me, just getting 3 quick ground balls to shortstop off the meat of the bat was just as sexy to me or more than striking 3 guys out because I didn't want to waste 12 pitches.
Right.
And so a lot of guys don't buy into that because it's so built into us that harder is better. And they say, oh, these days. It's always been that way. If you go back to 1980, everybody was trying to throw as hard as they could. Right. It's just the mentality of a male. It's like testosterone and ego. And for me, it just wasn't about that. I wanted to get deep in the ball game. I had one goal every season. They would ask me preseason, what is your goal this year? It was to throw 200 innings. That's it. And the reason was, I know if I throw 200 innings, I know I'm going to have 20 quality starts, and I know that every other number will take care of itself. Yeah. And, I didn't care if I struck out 150 in a season or if I struck out 90. It made no difference to me. It was just a matter of, can you get deep in ball games, and then everything else should fall
in
place.
You've got 8 other guys behind you to pick you up.
Right.
Do a lot of pitchers do that? Do they obsess over their numbers?
There's no doubt in my mind that they do. They might say they don't, but I mean, if you just watch guys, a lot of times you want to look up and see how hard you're throwing just because it'll give you a barometer of how you're feeling that day. Like sometimes you feel terrible. You look up at the radar gun and you've got a little zip on it. And then there's other days you might feel like, it's coming out of my hand good, and it's not. So sometimes you just want to see a barometer. But there's guys who, at the end of the game, they're looking down the stat sheet and they don't even feel good about their performance no matter what the score is if they didn't throw, 95 17 times. It's like, it makes no difference, but it's very hard to tell that to somebody who's been functioning, with about the strikeout and velocity.
If that's ingrained in you, it's
right.
going to stay there.
And you would think that they would slowly start switching that over because I would agree with you. Pitch counts being down, saving young kids' arms. Teach them how to pitch some other pitches that are going to cause ground outs, pop flies, etc.
Right.
And I'd rather see that than 102 mile an hour. And God knows where in the hell it's going to go because that batter connects on that son of a bitch. It could be a bunt. It's going over the home run wall.
Right. I've been saying for a long time, I literally think the biggest problem with pitching at the professional level is that in the minor leagues, they're telling guys, they're basically saying, 5 innings is all we want from you. And when you tell a guy that you only want 5 innings from him, you get to the big league level, it feels insurmountable to get into the 8th inning. Where if at the younger levels they would tell guys, hey, you're going to go out there today and you're going to get deep in the ball game, and I don't care how you do it, you're going to go all 9 today. If you have to do that, it means you have to start slower, right? You've got more kids now who can throw 95 to 100 than ever before. Well, if I tell you only have 5 innings and 80 pitches, you're going to throw every pitch as hard as you can. Yeah. But if I tell you got to go 9 tonight, no matter what, I don't care if you have 117 pitches, you're going to go out there and you got to start the race slower. And that will do a few things. One is it keeps guys healthy. 2, it'll tell your brain that I can get deep in a ball game. And also, it'll stop guys from getting hurt and will give them a bit of feel. That is the hardest part about the game that you don't realize is when guys throw 95 to 100, it's like driving a car that fast. It's very hard to have command. But if you would just back it down just a little bit, like 7%, your then control will get much better. But a lot of guys don't. They're fearful of getting outs with a little bit less. And when you're telling guys at the minor league level, you got 5 innings tonight and that's it, there's no reason for them to do that. And so I feel like they're doing them a disservice, and you're never going to get a Kurt Schilling out of that. You're never going to get a guy like Max Scherzer who can just, get deep in a ball game and figure out how to do it.
Yeah. Normally around here, I don't pay a ton of attention to what's going on in spring training. But I find it interesting this season, what's happening in spring training, because I'm interested to see what goes on with now that they're working with the pitch clock. I think it's interesting to see how the pitchers attack it, how the hitters attack it, the gamesmanship that's going on. I mean, you have that Wandy Peralta throwing against that dude from, I forget, from Minnesota or whatever. But, the plate appearance lasted 20 seconds. That's pretty crazy. How would you have done with a pitch clock like they have now?
I'd love to pitch quick, so it wouldn't have bothered me at all. I was a guy who just got the ball and liked to throw it. And part of that was just because I wanted to get off the field early.
But it opens up a lot of possibilities, though, doesn't it, with the pitch clock? I think it does.
Yeah, I think the rule changes this year are probably the most significant I've seen. only being able to pick off to first base twice is throwing a whole nother strategy into the game for the base runner and for the guys having to think about the running game. You know, that in the pitch clock is it's going to affect a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys who there's a rhythm to the way that they pitch that they're going to feel some sort of a pressure, and that extra pressure is going to allow them to be uncomfortable for a while. And it's going to, you know, I think guys will adapt to it. I don't think it's insurmountable. You know, as you start playing at a higher and higher level, you sometimes slow the game down because you want everything to be perfect. So you see guys stepping out of the box and wanting to feel perfect. You know, if you watch Rafael Nadal play tennis, right, it takes him, you know, 25 seconds just to serve a ball because he's doing all these things, and some of those just become habit. But some of these guys are going to have to break those habits and find a way to get a little bit comfortable up there. And I think they'll be able to. It's just something that you got to train yourself to do.
I was just watching him do it up here earlier today. It's exhausting to watch.
It is.
Oh my God.
Right, but for him, it's comfort.
Yeah.
Right, and I played with Nomar Garcia-Parra, and he was probably the worst I've ever seen. I mean, this guy was doing hundreds of things for superstition before every at bat.
It's like Serrano from Major
who
League.
Kept doing the,
That's Nomar, yeah.
oh my God. I'm going to read one more copy, and then I got one more question because this
I got a question before we
has
head out as well.
actually been bothering me. Elite Automotive. Car won't start. A light is on. Call Elite Automotive at 859-431-3548. They have the mechanics to take care of your needs. ASC certified mechanics at a modern facility with the most up-to-date equipment and diagnostic tools in the industry. You can schedule your appointment online at Elite Automotive. Jeez, get a free shuttle. Walk-ins are always welcome. You also get a 1-year part and labor warranty with unlimited mileage. Taking care of customers is the main priority at Elite Automotive. God, I should go to Rosetta Stone with
You
Dan.
make fun of
God.
Dan. That is.
Give them a call today to get all your services taken care of. Elite Auto. I'm going Elite Auto from now on. 859-431-3548.
Not easy to read out loud, is it?
No, it's very easy, Dan. It was the first time I read it. You've been reading that for months. Are
I
you
do.
shitting me?
I do want to give a special shout out to Paul at Elite Automotive, because we would not be YouTube streaming and on video if it wasn't for Paul and Elite Automotive. We appreciate you.
Thank you,
Thank
Paul.
you so much for
New
supporting
sponsor.
us.
One more and I'm out of here.
You're awesome.
Car troubles? Better call Paul.
Bronson, I got a question.
Oh, go ahead. Usurp.
My turn.
Yep. Usurping.
And it's been texted me a couple different times. So obviously you're sitting with 3 non-major league ball players. Could you
tell?
Have you ever gotten a call from the dugout, signal, whatever, take him out?
Oh, to drill somebody?
Yes.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, not from the dugout. Usually, it's it only a few times in my career. I mean, I led the American League in 2005 and hit batsmen, and none of those were hit on purpose that year.
And I was laughing when I read that, though.
Maybe one. Maybe one.
Maybe one.
But no, I definitely have had it. I remember a game in Tampa very distinctly. I had to hit 2 guys, and it started days before that. Schilling was supposed to get Carl Crawford because they had got Manny Ramirez and David Ortiz. When I was with the Red Sox, it was said out loud in meetings, if Manny Ramirez gets hit, if David Ortiz gets hit, we don't care if it bounces up there and hits him in the big toe. Their big dog is getting drilled as well, right? Because you depended on these guys to drive in at least 200 runs a year, and you just couldn't afford them to being hurt. So,
Right.
So we're in Tampa, and Lou Piniella was the manager, and he used to love to drill a bunch of guys.
Sweet Lou.
They hit Millar, and then they threw one at David Ortiz's face, and I remember my pitching coach. He walks by me in the dugout. It was the 6th inning. And he doesn't even look at me. He just screams, "The first motherfucker goes down." And so,
See, this is the behind-the-scenes stuff that, this is what people want to hear.
I know this Dave Wallace, and he was already at that time probably about 65 years old. And he walks by me, and then he comes back about 2 minutes later, and he says, it's the 6th inning. He's like, they've already put warnings out. He's like, don't worry about it. He's like, I don't want you to get kicked out of the game. And then he got 2 steps away from me, and he said, no, fuck it. He said, hit him anyway. So I went out there, and I drilled the first batter in the thigh, and I got tossed out of the game. And in Tampa, they rarely had fans, So it was like I got a standing ovation from all the Red Sox fans.
It's that is the crappiest stadium that I've ever been in.
Yeah,
or dome, whatever.
It's a strange vibe because
terrible.
You don't have the atmosphere you're looking for. You can't see the sky. Also, the grass is
the first dome I've ever been in, and it was Derek Jeter's last season. So I was fortunate enough that I'd never seen Derek Jeter play. So I got to see it. But we're sitting in this place. I'm like, where the hell are we? I mean, you feel like you're in a ghetto.
Yeah.
And it's just, and like you said, you're all enclosed in, and that's not baseball to me.
No, there are some domes though that feel pretty good. I always love playing in Houston, Milwaukee, because they have real grass and they can open it up. So when you have the ability to open and close it, but in Tampa you can't do it. And then there's all kinds of weird structures inside that
you
building.
walk up to go down.
Yeah.
As a fan, you walk up to go down into your seats. It was very, very mind-boggling to me. Growing up with Great American Ballpark, which I think is one of the best ballparks.
It is
myself.
It is. It's a beautiful place. It's very similar to Pittsburgh in a lot of ways. The playing surface is nice. The scenery is nice. It's very fan friendly. There's a lot of stuff going on in the ballpark that's enjoyable, food wise and entertainment wise.
Yeah.
But some of those old parks, like old Minnesota, was kind of like Tampa in a way. You'd walk in there and just think. And also Montreal. I played in Montreal when I was a rookie. Wow. Vladimir Guerrero was very young at the time, and they had like Jose Vidro. They had a pretty good ball club, but playing inside that place was just so quiet. You could hear the guy asking for popcorn from left field in the dugout. Yeah.
Here in Cincinnati, when it comes to managers, I think Sparky Anderson is probably the all-time number one, but Lou Piniella is definitely one of the favorites here in Cincinnati. And give us a little Lou Piniella story.
Oh, man. I didn't know Lou well. He started working with the organization when I was, 35, 36 years old, kind of winding it down. And he was slowing down a lot. I would see him in Tampa sometimes at his golf course. And I didn't get to see the fiery Lou. I mean, I think everybody has seen the video of him going at
classic.
Going in the locker room toe to toe. I mean, you don't see that anymore. I mean, the game.
Him and Dibble, and Dibble going at it, and then him throwing that base was.
I know. In the old days, there was stuff that would go on that just is completely unacceptable now. I mean, if you had a manager go at a player like that now, I mean, the manager might be suspended. Who knows? But
it's a kinder, gentler world that we live in, apparently.
No doubt. When I got called up when I was 23 years old, I mean, it was not fun to be in a big league locker room as a young kid. I mean, you would literally, you couldn't shower, you couldn't eat food until everybody else left. It was like, they were hazing you for not 3 months. They were hazing you for 3 years. I mean, they talk about now like we're not allowed to dress the rookies up half the time now. I mean, I got dressed up for four straight seasons.
So they still called you rookie 3 years in?
Oh, you had to have a guaranteed contract before you were not considered a rookie. And then I got to Arizona in 2014, and they were saying center fielder, 27-year-old A.J. Pollock with less than a year of time is a veteran center fielder. I was going on 4 years in the game, and they were still dressing me up like I was a water boy.
That's some good H2O.
Yeah.
High quality.
Oh, yeah, the old days, man. I would have to carry like a 70-pound bag on every road trip full of ice-cold beers. And then when I get to my hotel room, I had to keep them on ice the whole time because anytime it would be like 3 o'clock in the morning. My phone would ring, and it'd be like, get down here. We want those beers. And then you'd deliver the beer to some veteran guy like Jason Kendall, and he would just like, thanks, slam the door in your face. They'd be having a party, and not one time did you ever get invited in.
Oh, man.
Carry it back up. We'll call you when we need more.
Yeah, and if you didn't answer the phone and didn't bring the beers down, they'd order 100 Philly cheesesteaks to your room and charge them to your room.
Oh, shit.
It's like, it's like impossible tide to kind of fight, so you just had to go with it.
What are you doing April 11th, 12th, and 13th?
April 11th, 12th, and 13th.
Yeah, just curious.
Let me look at my master schedule. I don't know. I'll tell you right now.
We're going to Clayton, North Carolina for a big rally thing with another podcast, and we need a Sherpa. We need somebody to carry beer around for us.
Oh, wow.
And since you've got the experience,
he's going to try to get Dan to do it, but
I do have experience at that. I'm a good Sherpa because I don't drink the beer, so
that's perfect.
I know.
Here's the one question that I am curious about, because we were talking previously that I enjoy college baseball and I watch women's softball on the college level. They got the armbands with the coaches calling in the pitch and shit to the mound. When you were playing, I don't think the coaches called the pitches in. It was more or less you and the catcher, correct? I mean, how does that work?
It depends on where you're playing. So a lot of times at the college level, the coach is calling the pitches. A lot of times. At the big league level, the only time I'd ever seen a coach call the pitches was Pittsburgh in about 2011 and 12. Their pitching coach at the time was you didn't know he was calling him unless you really paid attention. He had like this signal system that he was using, this card in his hand, and he was calling the pitches. But at the big league level, even in the minor league level, normally you're out there on your own. But they usually lean on the catcher more than they do the pitcher. So most of the time, a pitcher is taking a suggestion from the catcher and saying, okay, I'll throw that. And maybe if he doesn't like it, he'll shake it off.
So you both are studying
Both guys are
the
studying.
hitters
Yes.
that you're going to face.
Yes.
And then
And normally the starting pitcher, like a guy like Johnny Cueto, is going to throw whatever Ryan Hannigan puts down 80% of the time. When I pitched, it was kind of the opposite. I was basically dictating the tide, and the catcher would tell me in certain instances, no, I don't want you to throw that.
was
So-
that a middle finger, like flamboyantly
no, it was kind of
thrown
like,
down?
so he puts a curveball down, and I say no, and he puts it down again. Then he's really saying to me, like, no, I really want this pitch. And that would only happen, like, 3 times in a game at the very most for me. You know, I pitched very unorthodox. So in a lot of ways, that chess match I was talking about was coming from my mind, and I couldn't relinquish the control to allow the catcher to dictate the game like he did to most people, because if I got my butt kicked, I felt like I wanted to have my hands on the wheel. I wanted to own it. And so a lot of times, guys like David Ross and Ryan Hannigan, when they would catch me over the years, they would figure out my strategies in a lot of ways, and they could follow along, even though they were very unorthodox, but they'd seen it so many times that then they could think along lines with me, and we didn't have to shake off that much. But there was no way that I could just have a catcher put down every signal and just throw it.
You end up with a Crash Davis from Bull Durham issue ever, where the catcher comes up and he's like, you know what, just go ahead and hit the mascot. Yep. You're not listening to me, so.
Yeah. I got into it one time, not really got into it with him, but when Ramon Hernandez was catching here, he was a veteran guy. He had come from places where he was dictating the game most of the time. And for me, I just pitched backwards. So a couple of days, I got my butt kicked with him, and he was irritated with me.
Your best catcher in your career that you would want to throw to in the afterlife, who would it be?
It's a toss-up between Hannigan and David Ross.
David Ross was awesome.
They both were defensive catchers. They both thought they both had great brains. They both could throw really well, and they didn't think about their offense. They were there in the war with you on the defensive side, and I can't say that about everybody. When I played, Jason Varitek was a great leader on the Red Sox, but he probably wasn't as gifted as those guys defensively, and was a little bit better offensively. And he also was kind of manning. In a way, Varitek was manning a lot of responsibility for the whole team, in a way, being the captain,
right,
where Hannigan and Ross could just be entrenched in being a defensive catcher and just really think about the game plan and only that. And so I'd say one of those two guys. I didn't get to throw to a ton of guys, but like Jason Kendall with the Pirates back in the day, in my mind, he was more worried about his offense than he was about the guy on the mound, and it was very difficult to pitch to a guy like that.
David Ross was awesome. I got to meet him a couple different times, but and even seeing him as a manager now, just his managerial, the same thing. Like he's dialed in.
Right.
Like he looks like a tough guy. Is he a tough guy?
He's not a guy. He's definitely not a guy who's trying to fight anybody. But I'm sure that if push came to shove, you probably wouldn't want to mess with David Ross. He's a big guy by nature, but. Having a catcher back there who there's also a thing about a catcher that the way they set up can be very inviting to throw strikes or very not inviting. And those guys had a way of kind of making you feel like you're throwing into a tunnel. Like, I can throw strikes here, right? And there's something about that. There's some catchers who are really good hitters. They're basically a pinch hitter, let's say, who's having to catch once in a while. A lot of those guys, they sit back there in a way that's so uninviting to throw strikes. It's very difficult to get out there and throw full games to those guys.
That's interesting.
I've never heard that take before. I listen to a lot of Reds on radio, and of course we've got Jeff Brantley, the Cowboy, now, and I feel like he brings a lot of his perspective from the pitcher side, because he was a pitcher, and I feel like I've learned a lot about pitching listening to him over the last several years call a game.
I've learned a lot about UDF ice cream and
that too.
From Brantley
Definitely,
as well.
and shrimp boils and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
That's one of my favorite, man. He's like, driving down in my drop-top Mercedes, and I went up to UDF and got me 3 scoops of ice.
That's actually a pretty good impression.
That's not bad. That's not bad at all. I was playing golf with him one time, and we were on a par 5, and we were playing a scramble.
We're not going through each shot, are we?
I was going to say, it's a long story, Dan.
No, we pull up to the drive, and Jeff Brantley's pulling. He's going to hit driver off the deck. I said, what are you doing, man? I said, it's an easy par 5. He says, I didn't come here to lay up.
Yep, that's him.
Give me a Jeff
Hey.
Brantley story. I love that guy.
I'll tell you what, I'm surprised Jeff Brantley's still alive, to be honest with you, because for years I've seen him eat 2 Snickers bars, 3 Cokes for breakfast, and then not have anything else to eat except for a 40-ounce steak that night and a couple of beers. I'm telling you,
It's like a John Daly,
I'm
man.
telling you, he will tell you right out of his own mouth that's what he's done for the last 40 years, and I can't believe he's still healthy.
Well, see, the problem is if he changes it now, his body's going to be like, F you. We're done. We're done. Oh, you're doing lettuce? What the hell?
Yeah.
Hey, guys, I want to thank you all for coming out. And I definitely want to thank this gentleman here next to me, Bronson Arroyo. Absolute treat, absolute pleasure.
Can we get a round of applause for Bronson Arroyo? That was great. Great podcast.
I was going there to ask for that, but thanks, Dan. What a great day with Bronson. I enjoy the fact that you came out here, you gave some of your time, effort, and do me a favor, guys. Please support him. I mean, whatever.
Download
Some
his
might
album.
say 2023 album. He's got some vocals. I like it.
Well, if you I'm gonna leave these cards up here. If anybody wants one, there's a QR code on the back. Grab it with your phone, and there's many ways to listen to the record. But if these stories are from my brain, and what I'm finding is that just like a lot of music, if you listen to the album one time, you're like, it's okay, and listen to it a second time, it starts
Learn
growing
more.
on you. It's actually growing on me more
Yep.
now that I'm listening to it. But this is, if you listen to it from top to bottom, there's some good stories here. It's not a one-trick pony. There's some beautiful, quiet songs on here, and there's a bunch of rock and roll as well. But I think you'll enjoy it if you listen. You'll find at least one tune on here that you like if you listen to the whole thing.
Definitely dial it up because you'd rather be in his brain than my brain. Trust me on this aspect.
I think everybody in this bar knows
and
that.
Support Bronson Arroyo with his music.
Bronson,
support
will you
his
stick
band.
around for a couple minutes after?
Yeah, I'll be here for a few, but my wife wants to go to dinner. So
I
I
know.
gotta-
We won't keep you
and,
long.
and listen, usually it's like all of us. We always say, right, as guys, it's like, hey man, I'm gonna go down the street to my buddy's house. I'm gonna have one beer and I'll be back. And then 4 hours later, it's
That's
like,
what we call it. One more and I'm out of here.
I know, and
It's
that's
like
that's
2
my
days
whole.
later.
That's my entire life. It's like I'm going downstairs to play music at midnight. I wind up playing for 3 hours. And
Yeah.
it's like,
We won't keep you long.
I'm
If you
trying
can,
to
if
be
you
on
can hang
time
for a
today.
second.
yeah, I'll be here.
We appreciate it. Thank you, Bronson. Thank you very much. Thank you guys for coming out.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Thank you to our sponsors.
Great
Thank you so
audience
much.
today. Thank you.
Awesome time. So glad to meet him.
We end the show.
shit, my bad.
usually the same way, and Rob just messed
Yeah,
it up.
I
but
was still excited. I know Bronson does. I know I do. I know Kiefer does. But the question that eludes us all is, Dan, do you manscape?